Hi everyone, welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. This is your hub for engaging in deep conversations around serotonergic hallucinogens that alter perceptions, affect cognitive processes, induce mystical and spiritual experiences. Enjoy the show. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode. Today I have a very special guest for you guys. We have Sanne Ham in the house. She's from Netherlands and she is a trauma integration therapist and an entheogenic guide. So we're going to dive into her story and also Sanne's how she came into the psychedelic space and how she became a guide with psilocybin. So let's dive into it. Welcome, Sanne. It's great to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I would love to talk more deeply about psychedelics and everything involved. So, yeah.
Amazing. So give us a little background of your story. How did it all unfold? How did you come into the space of psychedelics and working with psychedelics?
Yeah, so I'm kind of trying to keep it short. But for me personally, I'm born and raised in the Netherlands. So that's where psychedelics is kind of, the culture is really more open-minded about it. So yeah, when growing up, I already was very early introduced into marijuana, which is legal here. But actually, until later, I didn't really have experience a lot with psychedelics. So when I was 18 years old, I had a heart attack and a near-death experience, which really basically mentally, emotionally, physically really opened me up a lot. So I became extremely sensitive. And I also had to go through a recovery period because, I was lucky that still was alive. So then it really changed my perspective on life, death, and healing, and everything basically. So my world was kind of turned upside down. And I also went through a very profound spiritual awakening. Um, and at first, I didn't really know what to do with all of it, to be honest. So I did have this very strong intuition and inner knowing that I was going to heal from my heart attack. And I did within 1 year. The scar tissue that was there was even gone completely. So I was able to heal completely within 1 year without any sign physically that I ever had a heart attack. Um,
Wow,
so
that's so
after,
profound.
yeah, so after healing physically, first I thought I was there, I did it. And then later I also realized through different experiences that I was still suffering a lot from anxiety and post-traumatic stress. And that's when I went a lot deeper also into the emotional healing aspect. And I also became aware of how basically our mental, emotional, physical health is related to one another. And I also started to go deeper into the impacts of trauma. And then I started to get deeper and deeper into that. And it really helped me significantly with my anxiety and my post traumatic stress. And also, I suffered from dissociation as well, because I went through such intense experiences. What happens sometimes is that our consciousness basically can leave our body. And this sounds really scary for people when you say it. But this is actually very common for when people have a near-death experience or a very intense spiritual experience. Sometimes some people also have it when they go more through an emotional breakdown or whatever it is that's very intense for them. And I struggled a lot in school and everything because of that, because I wasn't able to study well, to finish tasks. So basically all practical matters became really difficult for me. And so this is where basically my integration process really started. So I then worked with a therapist, also specialized in trauma, and I was able to go to really significant changes. And until the point where I was so fascinated with the work, and I also started to study more deeply into trauma integration methods and tools. So I did different courses, different training. I was mentored by different therapists and people in the field. And then I went more deeply into energy healing, and also different like ancient meditation techniques that can also help us heal. So my healing journey started basically without substances, because what I really discovered through those experiences that I had is that our healing power really lies within. So at first I was actually really stubborn. I was like, I don't need any substances, psychedelics. I was really interested in the research and the experiences from others. So I would always love talking about it when I met people who had a psychedelic experience, and I watched like documentaries and different interviews. So I went really deep into it, but it took some while before I kind of had my own experience, and it actually happened by accident or synchronicity, kind of matters on your perspective. So I was invited to go to a Psilocybin retreat because a woman that messaged me, she couldn't go last minute anymore. And she messaged me if I wanted to take her spot. She was like, everything is set, you can go. So I was like, why not? Why not try it? I've done so much research and I feel like I'm ready for an experience like it. And I was.
And the fact that it's kind of landed on your lap through someone not being able to make it, and then you was offered to take the spot.
Yeah, and also when I looked into it on the website, also the two two women who founded the retreats and also the organization A Whole New High, also worked with the same trauma integration methods as I studied. So we had also had similar teachers. So there immediately was this
synchronicity, synergy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So also when I arrived at the retreat, their way of also seeing really it not just as, okay, let's have these experiences, but also really taking the integration process very seriously, and the emotional aspects of it, and also the connection and the safety of the space. So I felt really deeply connected with that. And I had extremely profound experiences. Mm-hmm. And now I see how, it's people can have that for the first experiences, but now I can see that it's quite rare to have such deep experiences, really from the beginning. And it really changed my perspective on healing, that we can allow ourselves to be supported by not only other people, but also by substances and these very sacred medicine. That's how I see it. And I immediately had this, it's weird to describe, but I immediately had this really beautiful connection with the psilocybin mushrooms, and more the spirit of psilocybin, which is called soma. So there immediately was this recognition and this safety with the medicine that I didn't expect, that you could have. It sounds weird for people, but I think people who've done psychedelics might understand that you can have such a deep experience and deep relationship and this deep connection with medicine. Yes. And yeah, so I had really profound experiences. And then how I got really into the work, a few months later, or like 6 months later, and Alison Carey, who did the retreats and private ceremonies with psilocybin, they asked me if I was interested in it too. So they kind of completely initiated me into that work. I went through the training, and they taught me everything they knew and how to work and create a safe space. And a lot of things were already easy for me because I had already some background in trauma integration therapy, which really helped. So to keep it short, that's kind of how I found my way to psychedelics. And eventually I also started to hold ceremonial spaces for private ceremonies, and also support Alice and Carrie at the retreats.
Amazing. Amazing. So this is in a nutshell how you came into psychedelic scene. So can we open a window?
Yeah, sure.
In your story where you said you had a near-death experience, this is very profound experience, and a lot of people who are probably heard of near-death experiences. Can you just kind of walk us through what this moment was like, the experience itself, and also the build up to that? What, now that you've done so much work emotionally, energetically, how do you kind of, what's the context that you put this experience in? What was the build up coming up to that near-death experience, the heart issue, the heart attack? I know you really well, so you talk about anxiety, having that anxiety all the time, growing up with anxiety, for example. I think it's so timely to talk about anxiety, especially with the post-pandemic, world. Talk us a bit more about what was that build up coming up to that time, the moment of having the experience, and then what does it look like?
Actually, like during before my near-death experience, I was suffering from anxiety and post-traumatic stress, but I was completely unaware of it. I can see it now, but at the time I wouldn't say I have anxiety or anything. I just didn't, it wasn't even in my awareness, and no one really talked about it. So I didn't really see it as a thing, and it was already sensitive, but I was incredibly good at numbing myself. I think unconsciously I just trained myself over the years to that's the only way to deal with my sensitivity. So I lived very unhealthy. I smoked a lot. I smoked like a pack of cigarettes a day. I smoked a lot of weed, but then not like intentionally, just more in a way of having fun and kind of numbing out my anxiety.
And
so
recreationally, of course, not really understanding how the effects are, especially with marijuana, right?
And
because marijuana is also a sacred medicine.
It is.
Yeah. And in the West, we see from very young age people are addicted to marijuana. There is a huge confused understanding about how marijuana is used recreationally, yet it's a sacred medicine, right? So this was just to help you get through your day. I like what you said about not being aware of the anxiety, the self-awareness of the anxiety, because it's interesting how a lot of the people who suffer from anxiety, they have found like coping mechanisms that they somehow function and somehow find a way to numb it down, whatever the trauma. Because I have a theory that we're all trauma survivors, and that all of us, every single one of us, carry some kind of trauma that is suppressed, and we almost live a whole life unaware of it unless we bring it to awareness, right? And sometimes you will be initiated to become aware of those unconscious mechanisms or coping mechanisms. And like you said, you came to this point where you had the heart attack and the near-death experience, which sounds like an initiation into bringing it into consciousness and an opportunity to work with it. Although it's really scary because you could have lose your life, but turning it around and all those things. But yeah, please carry on. So what was that? Just tell us the coming up to that point.
I didn't have any previous history with any heart disease. It is very strong in my family lineage. So my father had a heart attack and started really having, and he also had a near-death experience when I was about 15 years old. So actually back then, I actually, that's something I haven't mentioned that much, but I'm opening up more about it because I actually had a fear of death. So that was my main anxiety, was that I was I had this idea or this feeling that somehow I was going to die young, not knowing why, not knowing where it's coming from. And I had lost also friends and family members at an early age. So I was really, actually, my main anxiety was really struggling with the fear of death. And I also lost a friend of mine to suicide. So I was kind of suppressing all these things and all these feelings because I had no clue what to do with it. And it wasn't really something we openly talked about. And back then, I wouldn't apply for therapy or anything because I thought I was kind of weak. So I had this very identity of being tough and being a rebel, but actually I was extremely sensitive and kind of hiding it up behind kind of my rebellious armor, so to speak. And then all of a sudden, one night I actually felt certain feeling really sick, and like something was really going wrong in my body, and I didn't know what it was. And I was already started to dissociate, and I had this very surreal experience where I was sick, but it was like my logical mind shut down. I wasn't able to ask for help, and then I had trouble breathing. And then at some point, I didn't know what to do anymore. So it was late in the evening, and just lay down in bed, and I just poof fell asleep. And I didn't know what to do. And then next morning I woke up and I had like stabbing pain in my chest. I could barely breathe. It was like literally like someone stabbing a knife in my chest. And I didn't know. I even first thought it would have something to do with my lungs because I could barely breathe, and I didn't know what it was. So then I went to the doctor because I knew something was off, and I had to go to the hospital. And then they discovered I was experiencing heart failure. But they couldn't find the cause. So I had to then stay the night. And that night, in my sleep, I had a heart attack. And it's also possible for people to get heart attacks in their sleep, which is something not everyone is aware of. And what also something is that with women, they can experience a lot of different symptoms than men. So that's why a lot of times it's not earlier identified that someone is already. So maybe I was actually experiencing different symptoms before, just not knowing it, because the symptoms with women are very different than men. Which you're now finding out. And then, so it was basically the near-death experiencing itself. It was a transition from a dream into death, so to speak. And actually more studying mythology and all these different ancient traditions, more spiritual traditions, helped me later to understand it deeper. And that actually death is kind of the ultimate initiation. So it's one of the deepest initiations you can go through. And what is very common, and also what I've known to meeting people later in life who also had a near-death experience, was that often we're also confronted with our greatest fears. And this is actually similar to a near-death, to a psychedelic experience as well. So after going from this dream space kind of into dream, I kind of entered. So first I basically entered water, and I was swimming deeper and deeper and deeper. And then at some point I completely dissolved. So it was that I had no awareness anymore of my physical self, or even myself as like physically incarnated. I didn't have any contact with anything physical. It was just basically my energetic body, which is more like a thinking, feeling body. So I still had feelings and kind of like emotions, and I could still think, but for the rest, everything was black. There was nothing. So it was kind of like in this void. And then first I thought like, this is it, I'm deaf, and this is all there is. And that was my fear, was that there was no life after death. So that we would just float around in a nothingness forever. And when I was even very young, I was always very interested in God and what is God, but later in life, through different experiences, like a lot of people I think can relate to, when we have really painful experiences and we're confronted with basically the horrors of life, so to speak. I kind of lost faith completely. So I was like, okay, this is it. And I was like, okay, I'm there. And I was just in this extreme state of powerlessness. And then actually I just surrendered to it. Okay, this is it. I'm there. And I was just, and then actually I felt some relief. And then it was kind of like I was this source of energy, and there was these thoughts. I was like attracting thoughts. It was a different space. So I felt this very powerful thought flowing to me. And it was, if you imagine the light, if you cannot see it, imagine it. So it's like, I just need to imagine, and I put all my focus and energy, I need to imagine a light. And then there was like this dot of light, like a distant star, and it was kind of expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding. And then it kind of touched my consciousness, so to speak, my energetic body. And then I completely was dissolved from like being completely in the void, in the darkness. I was completely dissolved into the light. And then I experienced this feeling of what you can call like nirvana, or being, and it goes even beyond oneness. It's like you are with everything that is, and even when I try to describe it, you limit it. So I always say that the moment you define it, it no longer is everything. The moment you give it a name, it will lose its vastness. So yeah, so some people would call it God, or some people would call it being with the collective consciousness of everything that is and has ever been, or just the light that beholds everything. But even that is limiting. And for a very, it's not, there's no time, but it felt like for forever I was just in a space of being. It was just being.
You lost the time and the space concept completely.
I didn't even know I existed. Mm-hmm. So it went even, that's why I say it went beyond oneness, because I didn't have any perception of there being a self.
Yes.
Because when we kind of, to explain, when we have consciousness and we have self and other, we already are in separation, which is not something bad, but that's how we experience life. But in that state, there is no other, no self. There's no this and that. There's just...
Yes. So the separation itself is the way we experience the mundane, the physical reality that we know of, are familiar with. Yeah. I like that. I really like that. So how did you come back? How did you land it back into your body?
Yeah, that was quite a journey too. So so then there was a moment where I had this thought. It was like, I am one with all that is. At the moment I had that thought, I became aware of that there's an I and there's a self. And then I kind of became aware of my physical self laying in a hospital, basically dying. It's like, and again, I was then becoming aware I'm dying. I didn't know it when I was like just in that light. And then I actually saw myself, and I could kind of not see, but I could feel all the potential my life had. Like just this physical life. And I actually, for the first time, I felt love for myself. Just this incredible, infinite love that I hadn't ever experienced before. Yeah, and then I was like, I don't want to lose this life. You know, there's so much potential there. And then
what did the potential feel like or look like? If you
it was a feeling. It was a feeling. So it wasn't that sometimes people have that. For me, it's just, that's kind of telepathic communication. It's just, you don't even need thought for it. So feel it, and there's like it just feels like there's so much potential there. It's like it just felt like this dot is what you've fulfilled yet. And because I was so stuck kind of in that trauma loop, so to speak, I couldn't see that. I couldn't see my potential at all.
And this is where this is not the problem, but this is where the work lies. Because, you know, we always hear, you know, current teachers of our time, they talk about you creating your future in the moment, in the present moment, in the now, here. So the actions and interactions that you're having currently, right now, in this moment, are actually the portals creating, or at least having many future available, but you are creating that. So when you said you saw this potential, sometimes I speak to people and they say, you know, like mediums would say to you, oh, you could be this. I can see that you're going to be this, but because of your choices, you will actually be this. You are actually ruining that potential, or there are different future available for you, but you won't get there because you need to do the work and take action. So it kind of reminded me of that when you said there is a potential. I saw that I was only fulfilling a tiny dot. And also when people are in that trauma loop, because I'm very familiar with the concept, it's more of a survival. It's not a time to create. It's not time to learn. It's not time to think that we are part of the collective. I think when we're in that trauma loop, it's definitely a stuck place where we don't see beyond it. It's like a very tight bubble that we live in, and it's impossible to see beyond that. That it's impossible to see there's anything beyond it, even the meaning of life and the existence, and even the choices that you can actually make, because it's almost like the choices don't exist when you're in that trauma loop, right? You're constantly in that survival mechanism, constantly surviving, constantly in the defense mechanisms, triggered and melancholic, stressed, and the stress only gets amplified, and anxiety gets amplified. Isn't it crazy once you understand this trauma loop, that when you understand we have a choice to step outside? And your experience reminds me again and again, it's also, by the way, your experience sounds like a psychedelic experience, because a lot of people would talk about stories like that or experiences like that during their psychedelic experience. It's very much that it kind of gives me the hope that psychedelics are the portal that, especially if you listen to Dr. Strassman, he talks about DMT, the spirit molecule. He says this is in our body already. We produce this DMT. It is not outside of us. It's actually within us. It's everywhere. It's inside, in the micro and the macro. It's in the world, it's in nature. Every sentient being has it. So do we. And that, there are lots of talks about producing high levels of DMT during your death process and while you're being birthed into this physical world. So it just makes sense, and it kind of gives me hope that psychedelics are us and we are them, and it's like we're all one in together in this existence in different shapes and forms. And it kind of takes the edge off psychedelics, also like looking at them as something separate, different, and it's maybe potentially harmful. We'll probably get to the harmful, potentially harmful, or the risk concerns and all that in a moment, but let's kind of come back to your story again. So coming back to your body and realizing what this is, this process, and now you have an awareness of what's happening to you. Then what happened?
Yeah, so actually, first of all, I just want to say one thing. So from the perspective of potential, there's no lost potential. So this is something that I also really want to say, because this is very strong in the spiritual but development world, is that we can not fully fulfill our potential. It's not possible. But sometimes we have to go through certain experiences, not knowing why, and that's the path we take. And then we go to a process of awakening, either for me near death, and for some people it's the start of a psychedelic experience. But to know that all that was before you, it's not lost. It's not wasted potential. It's just you had a different perspective, a different operating from a different level of consciousness. And when you level up in consciousness, you can see that it was not working in a certain way for you, or you suffered greatly not having that awareness before. And it's important to know that because even when a child dies who's very young, it's not wasted potential from their perspective. That person, that being at a full life. And that was also the perspective that I was in. I could stay there in that space energetically, but I chose to come back because I had the desire, because I actually wanted to, and I wanted to experience that. And the more our awareness and consciousness grows, the faster we'll, yes, in a way, we'll be able to more potential, but all life is just as important. So, because it's all kind of a part of this sacred tapestry. And that is very important to say. And then when I had that perspective, I wasn't immediately back in my body. Actually, I was then shifted back into the hospital where I was laying, but I wasn't able to enter my body because I needed some physical simulation to enter my body again. So I was then just basically taught, like feeling form floating around in a hospital. And I know it sounds really weird, but it was my experience. And it is kind of bizarre. So then I just went to the room because it was a night shift, and then where all the doctors and nurses were kind of at during the night shift, basically waiting more, and they were talking, and then I was just shouting like, help me, help me, help me. But I knew no one could hear me scream, but I was like screaming kind of in thought, hoping it would just telepathically be received. And then actually that moment, the nurse came in and she just grabbed my arm. And I never forgot, it was like this spot. And just all my energy went back into my body. And it was extremely hot, but I was like vibrating energy and light. It was like it's so high. So I was just filled with this aliveness. It was like this electricity that running through me. And it is similar to what some people can maybe lightly or intense experience during like what they call Kundalini awakening, where you really have this vibrancy of energy entering your body. And that's how I felt. And then first she was like, no, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm doing so amazing. And she was like, what the fuck's going on? And yeah.
Can we go one step back? You know, you said you felt like you were floating in the hospital, trying to have that initiation to go back into your body. And you were screaming like, help me. But when you did that, how did you perceive yourself? Was you in a body? Was it just a feeling going around the corridors? What shape, form? What did you perceive yourself as? What shape?
I wasn't the shape.
Just a feeling.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, you could kind of see it as consciousness. But I then had I had an experience of having like an individual consciousness. But my individual consciousness, so to speak, so this perception of self, or what you can call the soul, maybe. So it is always very connected to everything. So it's not separate, but still it can kind of experience the center. So that's kind of the larger self is when we experience the center. So we are still connected to everything around it. We're not separate from it, but there's a center perspective. There's like this core, and that is what some people call their higher selves, but I don't even really relate to that term. It's more like a center self, because it kind of sees all that is around. It's not necessarily higher or lower. That's where
it's just like encompassing the whole perception of
that.
So so that means you were aware of yourself in the room lying down, but you're also aware of doctors, the thing, the place, the physical.
Yeah, I was kind of floating. First, I think I
Yeah.
was trying to get back in my body that didn't work. So then I floated into another room. And you can
So I get this, yeah, I get this image of like set of eyes without the body, just looking around, that kind of perception.
Yeah, it's kind of you're able to perceive, you're able to witness, and you're able to communicate through thought and feeling.
Okay.
But you just don't have your physical senses, so to
Okay.
speak.
So now you're back in, you're having this amazing vibrational energy, and gosh, that's going to be a hell of a work to integrate all of that when you are especially going to communicate that to other people. I think initiation itself is one thing, but integrating that into a physical, the mundane world that we know of, and also sharing that experience with others, it's another work itself.
Yeah, in a way, it's the integration process of a lifetime.
Yeah, I bet.
Beyond. And it took me some years to be able to normally physically function, in the sense of, like I mentioned before, with the dissociation, the extreme sensitivity. So basically, when I kind of was back in my body, I was so open energetically and emotionally. From that moment on, I was like, and this is relatively speaking, but like 10 times more sensitive, or even stronger. So I could suddenly feel everything. I could feel other people's emotions, their thinking, their intentions. My intuition was extremely heightened. And I didn't at the time, and this also my introverted nature, but it was also this deep knowing as well, that I chose not to share it for a very long time, for years actually. At some moment I did share it with my father, because he had a near-death experience himself, so I knew he somehow could understand, but I only shared parts of it. I kept it for myself for a very long time, because it was in a way an inner knowing of, I have to protect this experience. Same as where you don't share certain psychedelics experiences with everyone, because some people will think you're fucking nuts. I was afraid that people would think I was crazy if I would talk about floating around in a hospital, being one with everything. Not everyone is able to process that and take that in.
Yeah. So how okay, let's open a window here. So what is that, do you think? So what is that? So again, we can tie this really well into the psychedelic experience, because psychedelic experiences are just like that. We are always hearing people leaving their body and having a insane experience out of body experiences, and finding their self back again at the end of the process, going through these archetypal experiences like slaying the dragon, or meeting with the god or the divine, or like some people talk about, depending also what religion and background and culture we come from, depending on how open we are. And there are people who go through the psychedelic experiences but not really understanding what the process is. Like they come back and they're like speechless, they don't have the vocabulary or the context to actually explain. And I feel like you've gone through that experience very similar. So that's why I'm saying to you, that's why I wanted to talk to you about what do we make out of this experience when we say a lot of people won't understand this, and why won't they? Because here is another question. If we are part of that tapestry, if we are part of that collective, and that means we all have the ability for heightened intuition, sensitivity, and we have the inner knowing, but yet our experience in the world is that when we go through those, we think other people don't have the capacity to understand us. What do you make of it? I know you said earlier the death is the ultimate initiation. So are we saying that those people who don't understand or experiences these type of experiences now in their current reality, do they choose that? Is that their way of experiencing the physical world? And of course, it's their own right, and they have a right to so. Because this brings me back to the one of the most common things in the psychedelic experience. When you have it, you want to give it to the world. You want to change the world, change your partner, your dad, your mom, your son, your sister, your brother. And yet, maybe we need to hold back. Maybe we need to respect and allow them to come to it somehow as well. Or maybe they're not meant to experience what we are experiencing. Just because we experience this oneness, collectiveness, and consciousness, this vibration and the knowingness, why do we feel like we need to why do we make a separation? Like there's us and there's others who don't experience this, don't want to experience this, and they won't have the capacity. And yet here we are, there's a bunch of us thinking that we go through these experiences and that we somehow on a different level, like we get this, we know what's going on, but they don't. I never believe that, to be honest. That's my own personal perspective on this. I know they know too. I know that doesn't matter, like you said earlier, because this was so profound what you said, and we went through it really quickly, but I want to wind back. There is this knowingness in each of us that sometimes there is no lost potential because this is the way we perceive it, right? Because maybe that person who is causing a lot of pain to the world, who are living in a trauma loop, very narcissistic, acting really like selfish and have no idea the impact and the pain they are causing to the world, I feel like they are also fulfilling a potential for the greater good.
Yeah, potential can go both ways. And that potential itself is kind of, that's what I say, you have like this unlimited potential, which I felt. And then you have potential, when you bring it down, you have potential that's dualistic in nature. And that's how most of us, especially from a more human perspective, how we see things. So there's good, there's bad, there's good, there's evil, there is a right way and a wrong way. And it's actually very healthy for humans to have a moral compass. I think that's actually a very good thing, because it actually helps us to have some type of navigation system in this world. And I think it's very beneficial, and it actually makes humans more spiritual beings. And what we also talked about, what you said before, is about keeping things to yourself. So actually, when we go back into human history, when we talk about transpersonal experiences, so this can be what we experience on the psychedelic experience, what I mentioned, just my near-death experience, but it can be any feeling when we have a meeting with the divine or extreme, really synchronistic experiences, that these transpersonal experiences, and we can also experience it in partnership. There's so many different entry points to it. It's like so many different ways we can experience. These can be moments of epiphany. That there's a reason why we keep it to ourselves first. I don't. There's a valuable in sharing, but it has. And in more older Asian traditions, you call it fellow initiates. So if someone has not been initiated yet, doesn't say they won't. And a lot of times we call this, they are awake, right? They're going through the awakening process. So if someone hasn't had that entry point yet, they haven't had that experience in this life that makes them relate to you. You know,
that's a better way of putting it. So so I love that. So this is where I feel like I'm at in the same kind of space. So instead of labeling people as asleep, they have no clue, they're waste of space, they are horrid people, They are, you know, always causing pain to others.
Mhm.
I think, putting it this way, in this physical experience that we're having, in this humanness, the human experience that we're having, they are just in a different path. They're just on another experience plane, or
Mhm.
different initiation, let's call it, if it's going to call, if we're going to say
Mhm.
as an initiation. And just because you and I have similar perspective and initiations, and we've gone through a similar journey, it shouldn't make us the better counterpart.
Mhm.
Because this shouldn't be like a excuse or a reason to divide.
Mhm.
There's them and there's us, there's a sleep and awake. Like you said, this nature and dualistic, the physical dimension is the creation here in the physical plane is dualistic. And I think once we get that, you're right, we then stop blaming other people, or at least make it about them. Because the journey here, one of my favorite quotes that I keep reminding myself, and I've anchored in it, I've literally anchored myself in it, is when, you know, when they asked Maharshi, they said, like, there was a question,
Mhm.
so how do we deal with others? And he just said, there are no others. So that is like become my anchor in, this is all of that. Like, I know that we are perceiving others, that there are other people here, but ultimately this human experience is about us. And the more, it's all about us and our initiation, our journey. And when I feel like when we make it about other people, we are cutting short from the real work. Like, we are distracting ourselves from the real work, actually. So when we are fully focused on others, it's like completely navigating away from the actual thing that you're supposed to be doing in this plane. And that is the quote that I keep reminding, especially in the post-pandemic world. It became so relevant to me that I think as a collective going forward, I really wish that we can really understand this and stop making it about good and the bad and them and us, and because it's not really serving. And yeah, if we can just kind of promote that inner work, and it's all about your work, and it's about you becoming a better human, for you, for the planet, for everyone, for the nature. But of course, it's very difficult, right? Because you need to, again, let's talk about a bit more of how did you come to this understanding of this is the experience in this physical plane. It's not really about dividing or seeing that as separation, but also acknowledging your fellow initiates. I like that too, the concept of fellow initiates.
Yeah, so others are the mirror of the self. So others mirror back yourself. So you can kind of see it that there's a kind of like everything, like as mentioned before, is like a tapestry. And we are all relationally dependent. So we kind of exist in relationship to one another, right? Because when there's no relationship, we're just, what I had in my next, we're just in that void of nothingness, which some people kind of also can experience when they experience like nihilism. You know, there's nothing, there's, you know, that darkness, or when people go through the dark night of the soul. So, and what then, when you go through the process of awakening, you start recognizing yourself in others. And that is where your level of awareness is. So the better, it kind of expands. So first it starts with people you already love and hold dear, you know, like friends and maybe family. Because for sometimes people, family is the most difficult part, right? But it can be anyone, people you hold dear, or people that inspire you and you recognize yourself in them. And that actually already creates a connection. But the the more difficult the initiation gets is to kind of the further you expand your consciousness, so that you're also able to recognize yourself in people that you find annoying, or that irritate the shit out of you, or that you think are evil. Because basically what happens in the process of awareness, and I think for most people relationship are the most powerful entry point because we have a direct mirror of. So for example, what I mean is when we suppress a lot of anger and we're like, I don't get angry, I don't have anger. But but always you somehow, your friends getting angry at you or your partner getting angry at you, and constantly you're basically meeting people in your life that get angry at you. Maybe actually that is a part of you that's being reflected back that is angry. So you could kind of see it like that, and that is also this saying in alchemy, it's within so without, it's above so below. So as within so without, it's like what is happening internally. So like basically all these different aspects of your consciousness, and you behold it as me, Sanne, or as you, Susan. We have all these different aspects of our being. And kind of the tapestry works with that all these parts are kind of mirrored back with different people in our life, because that's kind of the attraction point of how they enter your life. So we have a lot of teaching now in the new age about like law of attraction and blah, blah. It's like think positively, but that is kind of overly simplifying it. Actually, it's a very complex tapestry. So we attract basically from all these different parts of ourselves. And that's just also where the integration process comes in. Because when we start recognizing ourselves and others and recognizing different aspects of ourselves, that we become aware of them, that's actually the start of the integration process. Because then we're no longer trapped in dualistic, kind of that dualistic separation of I'm right, the person is wrong. But we start seeing both perspectives. Yeah. And when these two perspectives come together and that they merge, so they integrate, actually a third is born. And that's kind of how creation works. So a lot of times people get so stuck in dualistic perception and they're going back and forth. But when we start being awakened, we start, this is what they say, a more creator or creatrix consciousness. So we kind of learn alchemy. So we learn that when actually the light and the dark merge, or we go through that entry point, that something new is being born. And that's kind of the ongoing process of creation. And in a small way that happens in our individual lives all the time, but we're just not aware of it. It's kind of a alchemical process, the same as when we see, like, same as what you have in chemistry. When you put two substances together, if they are the right substances and they're able to merge and go together, a new substance is born.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes they explode before they kind of settle.
Not everything is compatible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to see in our relationships too. Yeah. So some substances, it doesn't make the one substance right and the other wrong. It's not the fault of either. But sometimes, and we can have this with friendship, relationships, that we are no longer compatible. Mm-hmm. So that the natural reaction and response that we have to one another is no longer beneficial. So then sometimes you also have to learn to part ways. So because that is life. And in a way, yes, where you will continue to be connected in your tapestry, so to speak, through that person.
Yes.
But just in this life, it can be that that's what we can experience too, right? When we're no longer able to share these experiences and someone doesn't have, unfortunately, the framework to receive us in the way we want and need to be received. And then sometimes it's about kind of then we part ways.
Yeah. And it's okay to part ways. I think understanding the life process and making that to be an okay process is huge. I think a lot of the time we tend to tightly hold on to a lot of things. It's like aging. Like we never want to age, you know? But the process is every day you're a little bit of part of your physical self is dying. The moment we're born, we're moving towards death. right? And I think once we get that, anchor that in our being, and you just said, everything you said so far was huge aspects of integration. And you've already mentioned a lot about integration, which brings me to say, psychedelics are exactly that, without integration. And this also brings me back to this again, to say that, I think what we're seeing in the West, the way we approach psychedelic in the healing space, I think a lot of people are coming in because they want a magic potion to just make their problems go away, not realizing that psychedelics are actually initiators into more work. They don't take and wipe away your problems, but they create like almost like a path where you need to walk once you cross paths with psychedelic experiences. And it still saddens me to see that there are not enough conversations about the integration part of psychedelics, and also seeing them as an ally, another tool, just like meditation. If we can just kind of see them as a tool in helping us do the work. And the ultimate integration is, I always believe that it's not about transformation, it's about our response to the processes. I think you would agree with me, because you just what you've been saying earlier. It's not about removing obstacles, changing people, or it's more about changing our attachments to these physical experiences, having a different perspective and integrating it, to be okay with that. That's the hard part I know, because somehow in the West, in this industrialized life, we tend to think that we're in control and we can decide and we have a choice, and that we have choices, but on a greater consciousness level, I think we are unknowingly or knowingly following that path. And that's why we end up falling, getting up, making decisions that really change life, sometimes worsen. All of these experiences, I think, are part of integration. So just wanted to clarify that integration is not just about having the psychedelic experience and then integrating only that experience into your life, but it's about integrating your whole life through that experience. So what are your thoughts on that, Sanne?
Yeah, first of all, I loved it that you said that psychedelic experience is initiation. And the more psychedelic experiences you have, so if the entry point might be the first psychedelic experience is your first initiation, but for some have already had certain experiences before. And what is very important to know is that if you're looking for an easy life or a life to become easier, you're unfit for initiation. And this is kind of a hard truth that I want to throw at people. And then I don't recommend taking psychedelics. It's not going to do much for you. And this is also what I've seen with people that I worked with privately, that I had to bring that to them, to be really, sometimes you have to kind of what I call bring the sword of truth to people and kind of cut through the bullshit and say, in the end of the day, you have to do the work. And if you don't want to do that, then because a lot of people, they want to have the positive experiences, they want the enlightenment, they want it all. That's not integration. That's an unintegrated perspective, which a lot of people who are in spirituality get stuck in. It's kind of getting stuck in the love and light, and I am this and that, and I am love, and who knows what. And it's true, but it's half of the truth. And when you look at what is an initiation, there is a challenge or an obstacle in it. Otherwise, it's not an initiation. It's not a rite of passage.
Okay, can we
included?
Can we say that again? Because this is so important to clarify. if there is no obstacle or pain in it, it is not an initiation. So initiation doesn't look like rainbows and unicorns.
Mm-mm.
It's not love and light. Initiation, it is not love and light. Tell us a bit more about that. Why isn't it love and light? And you're right, we are experiencing in this new age spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
not just the psychedelic scene, but in the spiritual, like the emerging new age spirituality, it's all about love and light. What is that? What are we running from?
Yeah, so first of all, it's very good to know that two people can be in that same spiritual space of teaching love and light, and one is really authentic and they have done the integration work, and the other is not. But what is the initiation is, and actually my near-death experience is very archetypical in that sense. So it is the passage through the darkness and moving through that darkness and finding that light within, and then kind of moving from that darkness to the light. But what people have who are kind of avoiding integration work, they have experienced light or epiphany or spiritual awakening. And they've experienced this heightened perspective and they want to stay there. But they are afraid to go through that passage. So they kind of stay stuck in that first phase of spirituality. Okay, there's more, that we're connected, I am love, I am light, and it's true, but there is so much more there that you don't know. And so what, this is another alchemical saying, is the deeper the roots, the higher the branches. So you could kind of see it as a tree. You're both the branches, but you're also the roots. So you're both the dark and the light. And the second phase of alchemy, the way I see it, is it's kind of called the darkening or the blackening. It's kind of that you realize I am the shadow. So I am the person that is getting angry at me. Mm-hmm. I am that partner that constantly gets angry at me because I'm always suppressing my anger. It is becoming aware of the reason why I always struggle this pattern over and over in a relationship is because that was my experience in childhood. Or this has been even something, a lot of things are beyond childhood. We are an extension of our ancestry. So with me, that can be that experience of the heart attack, or with other people can be other things. But it's also understanding also the negative experiences that led us to that point. And only then we can have a full understanding of the self. So what actually people do with the new age spirituality to kind of label it a little bit. And like I said, there are also people who are really genuine. So not trying to overgeneralize, but what is essential kind of to understand is that that they are kind of stuck in a very selective perspective. And you see this with a lot of gurus and spiritual teachers too. They are doing what they're doing through control. And this is what we in psychology, you call it selective identification. So you only identify with all the light aspects. So you identify with the parts of you that are compassionate, unconditionally loving, but actually you're avoiding the integration. And when you actually look back to the deeper spiritual traditions and religious roots, they spoke about this. So in Buddhism, you have Buddha who meets Mara, and Mara is this shadow self of Buddha. And Mara, once in a while, Mara, the shadow self, knocks at the door, and Buddha invites it in for a cup of tea. And that's what we need to do with our shadow selves. We need to, having a cup of tea is kind of symbolizes the process of trying to understand that aspect of yourself. And in every spiritual tradition, you have this. So when you look at the Christian tradition, you also have Jesus meeting different people that challenge him, or having a meeting, some spiritual teachings called having a meeting with the devil. And that doesn't mean anything satanic or whatever people think to freak out, but it symbolizes kind of that we meet those darker aspects of ourselves or of life, and that we learn to understand it, and that we learn to actually interact with it not becoming it, but actually seeing why it's here. Why has it come over for a visit? So instead of when you get really angry, because that's what happens, people unidentify with anger, say, I never get angry. Well, every time you're angry, you suppress it because you have negative associations with anger. And because of that, it will also lead to different problems, because you're out of harmony when you're not able to feel certain emotion, because all emotions we need to experience in order to navigate our world. Yeah. For example, anger can be a sign that something needs to change, or that you need to set boundaries, or something is not working in your life. And when that anger knocks on the door, so it comes up, that's actually your shadow self kind of coming. It's like, I want to tell you something. Instead of shutting the door. And that's kind of what the love and light community does. It shuts the door to new awareness.
Yeah. Can we say then, in a simplistic way, the most simplistic way, that integration is integrating the dark and the light, meaning integration is integrating your aspects like angry, jealous, righteousness, selfishness, all of these aspects of ourselves, integrating it and bringing it to consciousness. Yes, I can be righteous. I can be very angry at sometimes. I can be very, very jealous. I can be very, very selfish. Mm-hmm. I can be unauthentic. I can be all of those and more, maybe more complex than that. But when you feel those emotions, it's just kind of understanding that and catching yourself. I know catching ourselves is the actual process of really having that consciousness and awareness. Sometimes it's not possible to catch ourselves when we're in that loop, mm-hmm. that trauma loop and that victim mindset. And when we perceive that, when we're in survival, let's say, and we perceive the world as a dangerous place and everyone's out to get them, get you, or get, that kind of a relationship with the world and understanding. I know it's very difficult to have the awareness to integrate. So I think that's why probably the integration part is very, very confused and we don't understand mostly. And many people probably think the integration process, I'm just assuming here, I'm just throwing out and just speaking out loud, brainstorming, but maybe they look at integration as also something rainbowy and unicorny, like, I meditate daily, so I'm integrating. That type of approach. But it's not that, is it? It's not that. It's about bringing the truth sword, like you said, mm-hmm. into the integration process, which is going to be very hard, because how hard is it going to be to say, yes, I behaved too righteous in that moment with this person in that moment, and now I feel so bad because I know that I've done something really wrong and that impacted. Accepting this kind of things, bringing awareness to this, is like the real integration in the way that I understand. Mm-hmm. That a lot of the new age love and light concepts do not leave room for this type of thing, unfortunately. Yeah. And another thing I wanted to just quickly say is that, like some of the teachers of our time, Joe Dispenza, he talks about, I love his teachings. I love his teachings. I've been to his workshop. But, there's a book where he talks about energy, how we think, we manifest, and if we change our energy. Not just Joe Dispenza, there's so many people out mm-hmm. there. Tony Robbins said it for decades. You just got to uplift yourself, up the vibration to change the awareness, the consciousness. I'm thinking a lot of the people who come to those workshops, to Joe Dispenza, for example, they are very stuck people, and they're coming for the high of getting high in the moment. But one of the things that are most misunderstood is that, yes, it's a good idea to change our state to feel different and that manifest positivity. But how do we draw the line? Before I get there, I need to first look at my mess. Before I start envisioning future amazing villa and a mountain house and a soulmate and beautiful children and money, I have a mess here that I am not looking. So, but then it's almost like it kind of makes people believe that, like, keep changing your habits daily, meaning breaking the pattern of being yourself daily, can manifest those things. What are your thoughts on that, Sanne?
I feel like, especially because I do like Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I think he is a very good teacher who's also aware of a lot of these things too, so he's also aware of the integration and things. And if you actually, this is also the problem, it's not always a teacher that is wrong, but it is also, you always filter it to your individual perspective and perception. And I feel like when it comes to kind of manifestation, in the way of kind of manifesting something in your life, is also, first of all, becoming aware of why do you want that. And really, like, that's the sort of truth. Really, why do you want that? And a lot of times, for example, a lot of times with money, actually, it comes down to I want to feel safe. And it's not for every person it's the same, right? But it's there can be so many different things. And actually, what it comes down is that what we want is a certain feeling state, right? So when we manifest it, it's very important to become aware of the emotion that we want to feel. So maybe in a soulmate, we want acceptance, and we want to be just accepted and loved for who we are. And we have the concept of soulmate for that. And it can also be that we set also certain desires in place that we really want to experience. But it's important to understand that, just first of all, the way we create is important to understand. So we have the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So the conscious mind is a few percentages, relatively speaking, of our total consciousness. It's very, very limited. The majority of our conscious mind and the majority of how we create is by the unconscious. You're not aware of your heart beating right now. You're not aware, usually, except when you're maybe meditating, but aware of your breathing. You don't have to tell your lungs, breathe. This all happens and with the body, it's obvious. It all happens on an unconscious level. And the same is driving, walking. Basically, almost everything we do happens on an unconscious level. And the same is with our creating. So if you're only focusing on just your thoughts that you're aware of, which is just a tiny percentage, yeah, it maybe shift your life a little bit in a positive reaction. So it is some type of improvement. But at some point, you will start to feel very powerless because you're not able to change everything. And then it's kind of when the shadow work comes in more. So it's becoming, again, aware of these different things. So, for example, we see this very obviously in relationships. So we're unable to change relationship pattern or whatever it is, or we're constantly experiencing abandonment or certain abuse. And somehow even if you break up with someone, we have the same experience with someone else, and then it's something way deeper is going on.
Yeah.
And it's also realizing that sometimes you also need help and support, or someone else to witness you and help you in that process. Because especially with the unconscious and the integration process, it's extremely beneficial to be supported and guided by it, because you have a blind spot. There's something you're not seeing.
Yeah.
And that's a deeper work, and that's not as linear. That's not as easy.
It's not as reading Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Yourself, that one book, because I don't know who said it, but there's one of the teachers of our time said, if it was that easy, we would all have 6 packs, a mansion, and millions in the bank, if it was down to just reading one book and elevating the state. in the moment. It's more deeper than that, you're right. And I also have the feeling of that currently, you know, we have this huge wave of people who are just going into those work. I mean, I've met so many people at the Joe Dispenza workshop meditation. They keep repeatedly coming back. I know that Joe Dispenza says it takes practice. You got to keep repeating. But I mean, how many times do you need to attend one of those workshops to be able to actually realize you're still stuck? I mean, how many times you need to keep doing those guided meditations to create abundance? I mean, if you look around, there's so many, you know, courses on 21-day abundance challenge.
Mm-hmm.
If it was that simple, everybody would be abundant by the end of it. They won't be stuck anymore. I think you're right. There are so many things that we're not looking in properly. I think it's because of a lot of fear, maybe a lot of unknown, this, you know, being scared of the unknown. But what you just said on the last part is actually the key. Having someone to witness your journey, because it's impossible for ourselves to do our own self-work alone. Yes, it may be okay to do it for some time, but at some point we're going to need someone who's gone through the work and are farther ahead of the journey than yourself to really kind of be there to witness your journey. And this can be also among our, you know, people that we choose to social, you know, all the social people that we have in our network, that we can also, they can be one of those people that can witness your journey, your self-work journey, that can mirror back and kind of kindly nudge you on those blind spots. But the person also needs to be really open-minded to be allowing that nudging and receiving the guidance, right? Because a lot of the time, our defenses are so strong. We're so scared of being rejected, criticized, that we don't want to go therapy. I think initially you said earlier that going therapy was like weak. It was like a concept of being weak. And I think that's one of the things we need to break down in this post-COVID world, that we're going to need help. We're going to need the support of each other and people who are further ahead of their journey to give us some guidance and support. So I know we kind of come to the end of our conversation, but this is so deep. There's so many facets that we can go into still more, but I'm so mindful of the time. So now, Sanne, your wisdom is infinite and so vast. It's incredible. And I think I always say this is to do with being open and also willingness and that consistency in self-work. It kind of shines through. When we're closed-minded or have those little tendencies of feeling judged or rejected, we always close the doors to deeper self-work, and then we tend to identify with, like you said, the love and light part of the self-work. So this is so crucial that I'm glad we touched on this. And also coming back to psychedelic, just before we leave you, the legal landscape, you're so lucky to be in Netherlands because, you know, it's not illegal. Mm-hmm. How is that kind of helping you working with psilocybin compared to the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world, many places are very strictly criminalized and it's illegal. Yeah.
Yeah, so it first of all has the benefits of not having to hide or not, being openly to talk about it, to share it. So not having to worry. So it creates, I think, as a guide, but also as someone participating in a ceremony, in a retreat. This gives you more of a feeling of safety. Because you know there is nothing bad going to happen. So it naturally already, you don't, same as you don't have to hide, and it's a way more beneficial way of working, and it's easier to create a safe space for it, which is really essential. So in the Netherlands, psilocybin truffles are still legal. Marijuana is legal, and actually most of it is actually decriminalized. So what it actually means is that nowhere in the law it says it's legal, but nowhere it kind of says it's illegal. So it's kind of like the gray zone.
Okay.
So it's different than what you're seeing now in other countries, where I think certain parts where you see that things get legalized, either for therapeutic use or just completely legalized.
Mhm.
It's different than in the Netherlands. It's more a gray area. So it is allowed. And that creates more freedom in working with the medicine, and
Yeah.
which I think is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, of course, we are seeing the term renaissance in psychedelic space, that in the US, a lot of the states are being also decriminalizing some of these psychedelic medicines. I know, like, ketamine there's been clinics in Germany, like in Europe, it's already started. I think maybe in the UK, maybe as well. Ketamine and MDMA. MDMA is on the verge of being also used in therapeutic, sessions, and as a kind of, I feel like the mental health space is the place that we are going. That's the direction, anyway. That maybe the mental health could use these psychedelic medicines as a new emerging therapeutic tools to kind of work with a lot of the mental issues that, especially now, that it's going to create. It's more anxiety is just kind of amplified, depression is spiked. So what are your thoughts, and your plans working with psilocybin going forward? I know you said you are integrating not just psychedelics, but also energetic work, shadow work, all these aspects of the work integration. You offer all of these. And also, going forward in the future, how do you see psychedelics manifesting in our Western lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel like in very different ways. So I think psychedelics are the most powerful tools, or medicine, whatever you want to call it, that I've personally found. But what I continue to come back to, and especially during this phase I'm going through right now, I continue to come back to that the medicine is within. The medicine really is within, and we don't need psychedelics to experience this, but the psychedelic can open up the doorways to really powerful experiences. So I do hope that the legalization in different parts of the world continues, and that there's more education, and you're doing it, and we're also doing it a whole new high. So you're just making people aware more of how to use psychedelics very consciously for healing purposes. So yeah, but what I'm mainly focusing on now is kind of that that how we can really also build more community. Because what I've seen and what I've noticed working a lot one-on-one with clients, and also different people and groups at the retreat, is what we actually need is we do need that place to share about our experiences that is safe. Is it either a psychedelic experience, or is it any type of experience that we're going to, spiritual, emotional, whatever it is, but that we're able to share it. And that we're also able to have the healing tools, apart from psychedelics, to actually do this deep inner work. Because when you're able to also work without psychedelics, you're, first of all, you will prevent yourself from creating a dependency on these experiences. So that even when borders close down and your retreat gets canceled, can happen for a lot of people right now, that you're still able to move through the issues that you originally had that intention. And that is, like we mentioned before, I feel like with someone witnessing, with someone holding that space, with experience of the inner work. And also that it can help us to deeply prepare for the psychedelic experience. So we're able to go a lot deeper. And at the same time, these different emotional tools like meditation, emotional alchemy, different deep meditative processes or energetic practices, They also really support us in the integration. So from now, I'm going to continue to also work psychedelics, and I continue my collaboration with Alice and Carrie from A Whole New High. But for now, I also mainly feel called to share more of my experiences. And I'm also now in the process of writing my first book, which is very exciting. And also really focusing on how people can really access the medicine within themselves. Yeah, because I feel like that is very important to come back to.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're kind of going to replace, and this is the only thing I have some discernment about with, no, not the only, but more things, but with psychedelics, which is very important. It's not just the medicine you take. It's what is the space that it's in used, who is your guide or your shaman or the medicine man or woman. Like really be aware that it's not just the substance, because that's the old mentality that we've had from the pharmaceutical industry. You take something, it's going to fix it. It's not how it works. So a lot of times when people go through these powerful inner experiences, it's not only because of the medicine, it's the space that's being held. It's the different tradition, these deep practices that we've been using for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And that connection needs to be there. And it's also then good to know is that even if we don't take any psychedelics and we still create that ceremonial space, we set that intention, we take the time to go within ourselves, we can still have very powerful experiences. But of course, if you have experience with psychedelics, you know that psychedelics are extremely powerful. Yeah. So that's why I continue to say it is one of the most powerful experiences you can have. But I think it's essential to know that it's not just the medicine, because the medicine co-creates with you. So with all the energy that you bring into ceremony, and the same is that the guide brings all their energy into ceremony with every participant, and that kind of co-creates your experience.
Like the set and setting, the importance of the set and setting, that a lot of the scientists, they research the psychedelic scene since the 50s. I mean, one of my favorites, Stan Grof, he always talks about set and setting, how it impacts the experience. And it's true. I think one of my theories is that maybe because, you know, you said earlier, we still have this understanding of, or we have this perspective looking at it as a medicine, just drink it and then fixes the problem. I find that's because we haven't had the culture around it, and also it's been used since it kind of dropped into the scene in the West. It was just like recreational. It just kind of got out of hand, and it just suddenly became a recreational substance. And I'm thinking, I mean, if you look at all the indigenous cultures, they had a culture around this. It wasn't a recreational ever. I think they would probably see it as a disrespect to use psychedelics as a recreational only. And I think the culture that we never had, I'm hoping that mental health space would be, or at least create, some way of not culture, but some protocols that we can bring psychedelics into the mainstream again, hopefully. I mean, this is the wishful thinking, but hopefully using mental health as bringing them into our reality in the future, in a setting where there is a guide, because this is what the psychedelic therapists, as you know as well, that we are now seeing a lot of people being trained in assisting psychedelics. And maybe this is how we're going to handle them much better, having that setting, the guide, like you said, the intentions, what are you bringing to the experience. And one of my favorite is that psychedelics don't do the work for you, you do, but they're just there to co-create with you, or at least open or initiate you in a way. So I think, but I'm still, I don't know, what do you think? Is this wishful? But I see a huge movement towards psychedelic, especially in the mental health space currently, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like, especially when you look at the research and everything that's
Mhm.
now being done, it is very powerful, because they discover how effective psychedelic therapy, how it really is, and when, especially in comparison to more conventional therapy, it's huge, the difference. And I agree with you on most. Only I don't think that, um, this is my own personal point of view, is that for a lot of people, psychedelics is not going to be it. I Because there, it's just certain people that are really attracted by it, and they love it, and they get extreme absorbed by it, and it's beautiful to see and to be part of that process. But I feel like for most people, it's not going to be the thing that changes their lives.
Mhm.
But I feel like the people who do have experience with psychedelics, that their transformative process is going to create, that's why I am optimistic, that is going to create a wrinkling effect throughout society, throughout different communities around the world, so
Mhm.
that the people with that greater awareness, who went through that deep initiations either to psychedelics or something else, that they're able to create that desired change, that is, especially through the pandemic, that we become so aware of, that it's really needed.
Yeah.
um, Only I am really someone who's like, psychedelics is not for everyone.
Yes.
And you really have to be in a certain space. And I do see that a lot of people that I work with, they are extremely advanced in their thinking, and they're so aware. um and they, even no matter what the experience they have, they're able to take it home with them, if it's super mystical or not. They really able to accept that. A lot of people will not, because if we generalize it too much, what I am afraid of is that some of the, like you said, the indigenous cultures, and the spiritual aspect, that it get lost.
Mhm.
um And I feel like there are a lot of therapists and psychologists who only need to train that transition to be able to hold that space very powerfully.
Yeah.
But those are also psychologists and therapists who are very advanced, and who are already very aware, and usually have done the deep inner work themselves, and are then able to get to that point. So, yeah, so I always say, like, don't enforce psychedelics on anyone. When they're ready, they will find it.
Mhm. I love
Just
that
like
aspect.
anyone of this listening,
Mhm.
you'll find it. Or there will come a moment where you reach out to someone, or you're like, I want to have this experience. And yeah, so
And it will
instead
find
of
you.
coming from research, oh, this is like a prescription of, like, you have depression, like, um,
Mhm.
psilocybin can really help you, or you struggle with this, MDMA can be really good. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
There are different types of tools, and we need to be really aware of how we use them. And I do believe there are many professionals, also in the scientific community and academic community, who are able to do that. I do have trust in that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I think um, it's true that maybe in the West we might lose the spiritual aspect of it when it kind of makes its way to the mental health space,
Hmm.
the therapeutic use. I am aware that this is I do believe it's a spiritual practice. Psychedelics are spiritual practices, tools.
Hmm.
And I do believe that if it becomes a trend and a therapist trains just to make money from being an psychedelic assisted therapist, and if the person is really not interested in doing self work, I guess that's fine. But I can see how the benefits and the value can saturate, and it can lose its power, or at least the efficacy, or it could lose that magic, the you know, the part that really does work, the energetic work that we, you know, seek in psychedelics. Yeah, there are loads of course, concerns and risks here, but it's almost, at the same time, it's almost like we cannot control it, right? It's just
You
people
can. It's
people
been
are
brought
going,
into the world
yeah,
now. Same as
yeah,
with technology, you know. So, and I think that's why it's healthy to have discernment. Same as with technology, we can use it for so powerful things. Its potential is unlimited, and the
yeah,
same with psychedelics. Its potential is unlimited, but we need to use it with a lot of awareness,
yeah,
because the more powerful the tool, the strong. Because that's the thing with psychedelics; it's an amplifier. So it
yeah,
amplifies everything that you bring into that space. And that's why someone who's able to hold that need to have done the inner work. Otherwise, a lot of things that would be helpful for you to work through wouldn't even come up. And I do believe that a lot of people who are attracted to work especially more in the science and academic circles, because they also have a lot to lose to embark on it now. Right, so
yeah,
a lot of them have genuine intention because it can ruin their academic career in a way. They can be mocked for it, and it's changing now. I feel like it's also there needs to be great discernment, actually, also with also the more spiritual
mm-hmm.
circles and things, because um, not every shaman or who calls themselves shaman has the right intentions. And
Exactly,
that's why we need to see the light and the dark, not only for integration, but also for healthy discernment. If someone
exactly,
doesn't feel safe, even the tiniest bit, even the last moment, allow yourself to set boundaries and say no. Because it is very important. If something doesn't feel right, really trust that intuition and gut feeling.
mm-hmm.
Um, because it's through that intuition, through that calling, that you really find the person that is right for you to guide you through such a profound experience. But it needs to be someone who feels really safe and we have already, when meeting, when speaking, have a deep connection with, because it's not there, it won't be as powerful as it can be.
Yeah, amazing. That's a good advice. So that when you do go through your psychedelic experience, make sure that someone is holding the space, but make sure before anything you are connecting deeply energetically with the person, or at least the space or the group or the retreat facilitators, first and foremost, for your safety, for your having that better experience and more benefit, to walk away with more benefits. Yeah, this is crucial. Thank you for highlighting that. And all right, so again, thank you so much, Sanne. Congratulations on your book. I'm going to end the call for us by saying what you said earlier. Ultimately, there are so many tools out there, but it's always comes back to us. And you said it's about, you know, activating that medicine in you. It's already in you. And I'm really looking forward to your book. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. We wish you luck in the future, and of course we'll stay in touch. Looking forward to have you on the second part. And your closing comments appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to our listeners, as when it comes to psychedelics, if there was one thing that you could advise, apart from having that, you know, discernment in connecting in safe spaces, but what else would you say in general terms?
I would leave people with something very simple, but essentially, be with what is. And that's how you find that medicine. And it sounds really simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy, right? So to really, no matter if you're working with psychedelics or something comes up within you and you want to work with it, be with it. No matter how long it takes, no matter how deep it takes you, stay with it.
Yeah.
And that medicine will be awakened within you.
Yeah.
And if you need someone there, you know, that's okay too. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you so much, Sanne. It's beautiful. So insightful, so deep. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this deep conversation with Sanne Ham. I'll be dropping the links so you can connect with her and follow her journey. And also stay in the know by, keep subscribe and share with your friends so that you can also be informed and make those informative decisions when it comes to psychedelics. Is so important right now than any time ever before. So we are moving into the Renaissance. Let's be more mindful. I think it goes hand in hand. Being more mindful, more discerning is going to help us move through the Renaissance in the best way possible we can. So thank you so much for tuning in. Bye for now. See you on the next one. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.